Good afternoon, YouTube. So I'm gonna use the 36 to mow my yard. We are gonna get rid of this monkey grass and weeds, and pretty much I'm just gonna mow it, spray it, and then pretty much cover it with pine straw, fresh pine straw. So I'm gonna put fresh pine straw there, over there, and over there next week though, but this week I'm just gonna try to kill it. But what was it, yesterday, a couple days ago, while we were out mowing, and then I had told Jacob to use the 36 to service a property, and normally I mow that property, so that's where I dropped the ball. But because it was our last property and I know he was kind of tired, I was like, hey, mow the front, I'll mow the back, and then that way we'll both weed eat, pretty much to make his life a little bit easier, because I know it's towards the end of the week, it's our last yard, let's work together and whatnot. And he ended up hitting a tree stump that was obviously on the yard, and he didn't see it, which I don't know how he didn't see it. But anyways, like a piece of that tree stump ended up getting stuck on the blade, and it ended up benting it. So I'm pretty sure the camera doesn't get it, but pretty bent up and whatnot. But it is what it is. He of course felt bad and whatnot, so now I'm just swapping them out, and then that blade is pretty much trash. So anyways, we did just hit 102 hours on the 36, so I'm gonna put it back together and then we'll talk about it. So there she is. So I did review my two stand-on mowers, but this video is specifically just for the 36-inch V-Ride 2, since we just hit 100 hours. So like I showed you guys, it has 102.8. So 100 hours isn't really that much, so there's really nothing for me to really nitpick and whatnot, but I'll just give you guys my feedback, especially if you're thinking of using the 36-inch or buying a 36-inch stand-on mower, specifically this Scag V-Ride 2. So this one comes with the FX600V Kawasaki 19 horsepower, and what I'm doing is once a week I sharpen my blades, just because we're not using it that often, but pretty much same as my 52. Pretty much I feel like after 20 yards or 20 of my yards that I do is when I'm having to swap out the blades, and that's roughly once a week towards the end of the week. And then starting the new week has a new set of blades, and that will pretty much get us through for that whole week. And I'm not really using it that much. With the 52, I'm swapping it out 3 times a week. But we're obviously using it a lot more because that's the main mower. So the main reason why I got the 36 is for those cookie cutter yards or for the back 8 yards. So pretty much where the 52 won't fit is where this guy comes in handy. The only thing I've done to it is I added the quick shoot, which you definitely need a quick shoot. My 52 doesn't have one, but it's definitely on the list. I might buy it in another month or two. Right before fall is when I need to buy it, because if your area is like mine and you have a lot of trees, come fall, pretty much November, maybe December, you're going to switch over to mulching up leaves, and you can't do that if you do not have a shoot blocker. And I definitely recommend the quick shoot. I know the other one is that grass flap, which I hear those are, that's great reviews. I ended up going with this one just because I'm familiar with the handle. So you just open it and close it. Super easy, straightforward, so no complaints. And like I said, the main reason why I got it was for the back gates and for cookie cutter yards, specifically more for like the back gates where the 52 won't fit. So we have about like 6 to 7 properties that last year I used to push mow. And right around this time during August, when it starts to get really hot, your body's a little fatigued, especially if you're doing this full time or if you're juggling both of your jobs. You're probably at that point where you're looking on getting a 36, a 32, or a 34 because you're tired of push mowing. And I was in the same boat, and that's why I ended up pulling the trigger. I got this during summer, so I definitely recommend y'all getting or shopping around during winter. I got this during winter, and that's when y'all should plan to buy equipment, because a lot of lawn care providers are either getting out of the business or they're retiring, and they'll put up their equipment for like 50, anywhere from like 30 to 50% off. I got this with 30 hours on it, and I ended up paying $5,000 for it. So it's a steal. Great deal. But it took me about like 2 or 3 months of me browsing and kind of like lowballing everyone, and eventually someone was desperate enough where they accepted my offer and whatnot. So from push mowing, I would say each property would probably take us anywhere from like 15 to 25 minutes. And with this mower, we're in and out on those back gates like 7 minutes, if that, anywhere from like 7 to 10 minutes. So, I mean, it cuts your time more in half, and that itself, throughout your whole lawn care career, it's going to pay for itself eventually. Now, if you do buy it new, I believe it's close to like 11,000. Probably with interest rates and whatnot, you're looking more at like 12,000 and whatnot. So it is expensive. So it does have to justify you buying it new, and that's why I couldn't really pull the trigger and buy it new, just because it just wouldn't make sense for me to spend that much money when I only have 6 properties at that time. Even now, I think I still have the same. I think just one time the 52, something went wrong with it, and it was in the shop for like 2-3 weeks. And for those 2 weeks, I was just using the 36. It took a lot longer, but I was able to still go out there and do all my accounts, because it is, smaller deck, smaller engine. There were a few properties where we had to double cut or triple cut, but it is what it is. Pretty much like any other commercial mowers, it has what height you can go to. So the lowest it can go to is 1 1/2, and then the highest is 4 1/2. Probably 4 3/4 or 5 if you leave the deck up here. So you have your choke, your throttle to engage and disengage your blades, and then obviously your on and off button, a little, cigarette port. I don't know if it works. Brakes, and that's pretty much it. The gas meter and whatnot. So like I said, I was just so tired of push mowing, and especially during this time, I really hated those small little properties because I had to push mow, and it's just like extra energy. You're there a lot longer. And then last year I was like, I need to just pull the trigger, and really I just got lucky. So I'm sure you could find a used one for like anywhere from like 5,000 to 7,000, and obviously the more hours it has, the cheaper it'll be. The less hours it has, the more expensive it's going to be. If you do buy it used, or if you do buy it new, I'll say I would have to have at least like 20 properties where I know I'm going to use it for me to really consider spending that much and whatnot. But anyways, we'll do my yard and then we'll get back to it. So my yard might have not been the best one to practice on, because you can see the crabgrass is starting to die because I sprayed it, so it looks a little off. But other than that, the cut quality is great. So luckily, I didn't break or bent my spindle when Jacob ended up hitting that tree root and whatnot. Yeah, it looks good. No complaints so far. There's really nothing that I regret. Again, if you have, I would say if you have more than 10 accounts where you have to push mow, I would pull the trigger. In my case, since I had so like little accounts, also for a few accounts, this was the last thing I bought, this was like my last big purchase. Because before that, I bought my trailer, my truck, my other mower, weed whackers, blowers, and this was I think this was my last big purchase. So you can kind of tell where it was in my priority list and whatnot. But I knew that I wanted one, or that I needed one in my toolbox or in my arsenal or whatever. I will say, if I was back in Los Angeles, because that's where I moved from, like all those yards are kind of like 1/4 of an acre. And if all my properties were like that, then this would have been like my first purchase. But over here, as you can tell, a lot of our properties are a lot bigger, where they're more like 3/4 of an acre or 1 acre, where we don't use it that often. So what it's probably been like 5 months, and in 5 months I've put in 70 hours. So we do use it every week, but not as much. But if it was for me, I would have definitely I actually prefer smaller cookie cutter yards because I feel like the profit margins are a lot better. But yeah, that's pretty much it. No complaints. If you're debating about getting it and you have the money, I would say go for it, because it will make your life a lot easier. In my book, it's definitely a green light. No complaints. I would highly recommend you getting one. But I did want to answer some comments. So pretty much Bossman is asking if I ever overbid, or if it's if I remember, I think he overbid and he didn't get the property, and he felt a little discouraged. Absolutely. Especially right now, I am overbidding on some of my properties because it is hot. So you should be overbidding, because if they want you to come out and service the property when it's 100 degrees, or the heat index hits 100 degrees, it's going to be a little bit more expensive than if we were if we were in spring. And again, these accounts or these clients that are reaching to you right now, they're not going to be long-term clients. It's pretty much just like you're just a filler for them. So probably they're probably servicing their own properties, and they just want to save some money, and it's too hot for them to be out here. So they're going to, that's why they're calling you and whatnot. So right now I am overbidding, but of course, I told them, my response was I normally underbid because, I'm typically the cheaper guy. But this is why it's so important for you to network with other people. So I network with like 3 or 4 guys in my area. And sometimes, when I was starting off, I would take pictures or a video, and then I would send it to them like, hey, what would you be at? And they would typically be like $15 to like $20 more expensive than me. And what I actually did last year is, for my property, I called the biggest lawn care provider in my area, and I had them come out here and they gave me a quote for my property and then 2 of my other properties, just so I can have an idea of where they are with their prices. And of course, they were a lot more expensive because they have more overhead, more employees, etc. The list goes on and on. But they were about I want to say 40% more expensive than what I was charging. And that was really like a wake up call for me, saying okay, I need to start increasing my prices. So now I definitely increase my prices. Now my prices are very similar to my buddy's prices. Still not where that big company was, because I really don't see people paying that much. But for them, they have to, because of because of all the overhead that they have. And then another one, I think he was regarding that it was a tough decision because pretty much my last employer offered me $100,000, and I declined it to do this. And he just said he has a lot of safety nets and whatnot. And I'm very, me and him kind of think alike. I too have a lot of safety nets. So that's why for the first 3 years, I was juggling that job and then doing this on the side. Because if this didn't work, at least I had my full-time job still. And then it was easier for me to kind of reinvest all the money that this was making back into the business. And in my mind, I just kind of pretended like I wasn't making any money. And that's why, my setup is nice. And I'll get a lot of comments like, nice setup. Or if people see me working, they'll pull. I'm like, oh, I love your setup. And, that's how I was able to get to here, by just really focusing and reinvesting all of the money that I made those first few years back to this business. And like I said before, this is the first year where I'm actually making money. And you should, you should have different streams of income, which is what he touched. So you definitely want to be doing stocks, real estate, your business. For him, he hasn't left his employer, but I'm sure it's down the road he will. I think he's still probably in the beginning stages of his business, just like how I was last year. And then pretty much once you reach that ceiling where you're like, okay, I'm declining jobs right now because I'm at my job, that's when you got to leave your job and do this. And it's very stressful. Of course, you're going to have doubts. But I mean, you just know yourself, that You know, if you put in the work, it's a slow process, but it's definitely worth it. But anyways, like, subscribe. I appreciate y'all. I did forget to say, because he had asked me if I was asking these potential clients how much they were charging from, or how much their previous lawn care provider, so that way you can get an idea of their budget. Yes, when I first started, eventually I'd be like, while I'm walking the property with them, I'm like, oh, how much did your last lawn care provider charge you? And the only thing of course they'll tell me. I don't think no one's ever said no. They would tell me, but the problem you're gonna run into is if they're lying. Say if their lawn care provider charged them 70, they'll probably be like 55. They're gonna try to lowball you, because at the end of the day they want to save money too. I'm not saying there are some people out there that would tell you the truth, but I would say probably the majority is going to give you like a lower number to see where, if you're right there with them. Now I don't. So now I just give them a price. I normally email them their quote through QuickBooks, and if they approve, great. If not, then I just move on. So when you start off, you are going to want to get all these jobs because you're barely starting off and you just want to get the ball rolling. And if you have to underbid yourself or lowball yourself for a little bit, what's the alternative? You just being home and kind of like hoping the phone rings. So, I mean, that's why the first few years I was underbidding myself, and it was really hard for me to like get out of that mindset. But it wasn't until I started networking, and of course I was like, okay, I am cheap. I am the cheap guy in my area and whatnot. And then, you just move on from there. But there's a lot of people out there that right from the get-go, they're like, nope, my minimum is 75, my minimum is 80 to even drop my gate. And obviously they're able to grow a lot quicker than someone that like me that didn't know what they were doing, and I was like constantly lowballing myself. But as long as you increase your prices every year and just, you just tell them that it's for inflation and whatnot, everything else is going up. So you are going to increase the prices by $5 to $10. And once you realize that you underbid, you'll get to the point where if they drop you or if you lose them because you increased your prices by $10, it's not going to hurt your feelings anymore. But